It was a stagecoach stop. So it was an old house, and it was cold. We had a cook stove in the kitchen, a big heating stove in the living room, and an oil burner in the bedroom. If I changed a diaper in the middle of the night and dropped it on the floor, it froze. So, anyway, that was the start of my life as a bride. And I can't think of anything else I was going to tell you right now. So maybe now I just raise flowers. And that is my joy. Thank you for listening. I'm so I didn't bore you too much. Thank you.
Well, are we having fun yet? Kurt, do not worry, I am not going to make it X-rated. If I would, you would be first on the list. Anyway, I was a year old when we moved here from Hampshire, Illinois. I was really a good baby. Never run away, never took my scooter down to Junko's. And I think Dad threw their bricks away. But anyway, I always tell people I was born with a welding machine in my hand, because as soon as I could walk and talk and push the lever hard enough, I could weld. And that was probably my downfall, because that's what helped me get into the concrete business. Anyway, hell, I built a motor scooter. I was the first one to have a side-by-side vehicle like you see running up and down the streets here now. You know, if it wasn't for me, there wouldn't be such a thing. I did. I built one out of wheelbarrow tires and 6-horse Briggs & Stratton motor. And Bill can guarantee that. He had a couple of the most beautiful friends in the world, and I didn't get to date either one of them. But they did ride in my side-by-side. Anyway, I can tell you a lot of things. Anybody has any questions, you just yell them out and we'll open this darn thing up. After World War, we were up in the blacksmith shop up by across from McCombs Phillips 66, and they were bringing a lot of these trucks home from Europe. And the rendering plant over at Alpha had bought a bunch of them, and they brought them up to us, and we were building the side boxes on them, welding, and that's where I learned how to build things. And Dad would say, get in there and weld the damn thing. And I did it. Probably wasn't the best, but I did it. And we even built truck boxes. Murray's always hauled horses from South Dakota. And they always had a box to build, so we'd build a truck box for Cleet or Jimmy. And my brother and I used to have to screw the bolts in the side, and I'd always try to get out of it, and Bud would totally bitch at me about it. And I got so mad at him one day I threw the hammer at him, and luckily I missed him or I'd have been up for murder. But we survived that. Yeah, the Murray's, Jimmy was a good friend of mine. Cleet was on the couch with me. I knew Cleet. I knew both of them really well. And they'd go out to South Dakota and buy horses from the Indians when they were changing from horses to tractors. And they would bring them home here a lot of times on the railroad train. Drop them off at the stockyards here, run them right up the roads, up to Cleet's place, and return them in there. And eventually they'd all go to the Fox Farm up in Wisconsin. And as kids, we would go up there and can we ride horses today? So they would, Cleet or somebody would pull a couple of them out that they knew were good, and we'd ride horses all day long on them, up and down the streets, run like hell, take them back at night, and then they'd say, hey, you rode them all day, now you cool them off. And that worked really well. And eventually, after I got married, we had a lot of horses. At one time, I think, I had over 100 horses here at Lawler, which after I moved to Wyoming, I took them with me, but the market went to heck, and so we sold them. Anyway, anything else? My mother, we lived up in the top of the hill there. My mother had all of us kids, all of us rugrats, and every once in a while there'd be a hobo sitting on our back steps. And obviously she knew him because he'd come about every month, and she would take a plate of food out for him and feed him on our back steps. And I was hanging around there, and after he got done eating, he'd walk away. Thank you, walk away. And then we had candy dancers too that came out here and worked in the railroad. And everybody would say, oh, don't let your kids out because they'll get them. Well, they weren't that dangerous, but I should know because I was out there. Too dumb to hide. But anyway, I had an uncle that was the fire chief of Cudahy, Milwaukee, right on the edge of Milwaukee, and we had passenger train service here. And Mother and Dad would throw me on that passenger train, and I'd ride straight into Milwaukee. I was about 10 years old, I think. And my uncle would catch me at the railroad station, and he had a big Cadillac with a big fire engine, red light on the top, and we'd never stop at a stop sign. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I'm lucky we didn't get killed. But he had season tickets to the Braves baseball team. Heck, I saw Hank Aaron. We'd go in Chicago. I saw Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle. I saw all the big stars at the time because I was a great baseball fan. But anyway, that was some of my highlights of my life. I remember in 1945 and 6, they had a big flood in Lawler. And Lawler had just purchased a new international fire truck. And Dad is the fire chief. And all the basements down along Main Street were filled with water. And every night after work, the fire department would go out and pump all the basements out so people could use them again. And I mean, after they got done pumping the basements out, they'd all go to Ray Woods' bar. And you know what happened there? Well, I remember one time, I was like 8 years old, hanging around. I know one time that the sheriff came in. He says, hey, you guys can't be having mixed drinks here. And John Murray was the mayor at the time. He says, get the hell out of here. We'll do what we want to. We don't need you here. Goodbye. And he left. That's not the way ice would be. But anyway, well, they got all the basements pumped out, and it really was a bad flood, worse than the one we had here a year ago or a year or two ago. I remember Crane Creek, when in 1946 we built the blacksmith shop down on the highway, and I was old enough then to sharpen sickles, and I hated that job. But I knew every farmer in the country. They'd come in and say, Roger, we got another sickle for you to sharpen. Oh, God, I don't want to sharpen any more sickles. But I did. And then after I'd get that one done, John McEnany and I and John Fox or somebody would run down the creek, and we were working on a tree house. Never quite got it done, but we were up in the tree. And when I heard Dad whistle, it was time to come back. I had another sickle to sharpen. But it was a good time. It was good childhood, man. I remember on my birthday, I didn't have to work. So he let me go fishing on my birthday. And there was a lot of water in Crane Creek at the time. It was deep. And, well, I remember in the wintertime, they would, the high bank right north of the White Bridge here, they would go down and cut ice for Doc's house, Doc's ice house. And they would haul all the ice blocks up and put them in the ice house and cover them all with sawdust. And they would last all summer. And then Doc would sell ice for all the ice boxes in town. And I remember a little later in life, there was a casualty there. Frank Stimson didn't show up one day, and he was on ice. So Frank passed away in the ice house. But anyway, then there was water. One year, their water was really deep under the White Bridge. It was up to 7 or 8, 10 foot deep, and we used to jump off the bridge. That was kind of scary, but everybody did it. Jumped off the bridge, and myself and I think it was one of the Murray boys or something, and we decided we were going to build a boat. John Mackinnon, he was there. And we had 2 old Ford trucks, or pickups, in the backyard there that were junk. So we took the cabs off there, and I welded them together and made a boat. And it would hold water if you had a Big Dipper with you. But we'd paddle that boat around in there. We could go about, I suppose, 100 yards up and down the river under the bridge. And lucky nobody ever jumped in the boat off the bridge, but they didn't. And eventually, rumor has it, and it's strictly a rumor, but they said that Mary Trunson sunk my boat. But I'm not sure. I think every kid in town rode that boat. Yeah, it was a good time. Yeah, but I lived down the creek. Lived down the creek. I remember one time one of my uncles from Wisconsin came down, showed me how to build a fish trap. And I took it down at Crane Creek and I threw it in, and the next day I came, and there was a big northern pike there about 30 inches long. I said, oh my God, it's the biggest pike I ever saw in my life. So I went and got my fish pole, put a hook mark in the mouth, up to the barber shop. I says, Chick, look what I caught. I didn't lie. And I don't think anybody ever saw a northern pike in Crane Creek before, but I had one. Yeah, so I was talking to town for 20 minutes. Every night we'd go down on the weekends, we'd go down to Martin's Cafe, and Mother would say, kids, you got to eat, after we ate dinner, she'd say, get out of the house, go out and play, and show up when the town lights come on. So we'd go out and play every night. When the town lights come on, we knew enough to get our butts for home. But we'd go downtown and we'd have a dime or something and be able to get popcorn at Martin's, Martin right beside the cafe. They had a popcorn stand. So we had popcorn and get a cherry Coke or something, I guess. So that was, and then when I had a BB gun, we'd just shoot lights out to, shoot street lights out a little bit. God, Joe Martin gets so mad at us. Joe is the town council, or the town constable. And every once in a while you'd see a light bulb that was shot out. Damn kids. I got to be a pretty good shot with that BB gun. But I wasn't the only one. So we had a good time. I remember one time when the Lutheran church was down there, we had a BB gun, and I walked over there with my BB gun, and there was a bunch of brush alongside of the church, and a rabbit jumped out. And I up and shot, and I hit the rabbit right in the eye, and the rabbit was jumping around. And oh my God, eventually he came to, and I got the heck out of there in a hurry because Dad would have killed me. if you knew I killed a rabbit with a BB gun. But I got away with that too. And in the fall, down there where Curtin there used to be a pond there. And we'd go ice skating there. When I was a kid, I was very poor at ice skating. I think my sisters were better at it. And in the fall, John McEnany and I, we decided we were going to go trapping. So we had about 5 or 6 traps. We'd go down there and set traps and catch a muskrat or two and take them home and skin them. And trapping was a lot better before season started. We always started about 2 weeks early where there was nobody else trapping. They were dumb then. But we got by that too. And you know, Junco Park down here, I was little, and Elmer really had the dray line there. He had 2 horses up there across from where we lived, and somehow I got to be friends with Elmer, and he let me drive his horses, because he would meet the depot, the train down here every day, and take the freight off the depot, and he'd deliver it up to all the businesses in town, and I would drive the horses from one business to the other, and him and his son John would go and deliver everything in there. And then in the afternoon, they would go around to the businesses and pick up any garbage or junk that they wanted to haul, and they always hauled it down to Junco's lot down there. There was no ball diamond there then. And we would throw it off, and there must be 6 foot of junk underneath that diamond, because I remember that so clearly. And we'd throw it in, and I remember one time the bank had a bunch of windows they had put in, and they had a big windows and panes, glass was in them yet. We hauled them down there, and John and Elmer were throwing the window panes off, and I was in the way, and one of them windows hit me and shattered the glass. Never hurt me, never cut me or anything. So I went home and I told my dad about it. He says, "That's it. No more driving horses." He says, "You're going to get killed." So I had to stop that too. That was my horsemanship in my younger years. And later I did a lot more, but I wasn't very good at it, to be honest with you.
I'm going to give it back to him, but first we're going to make sure everybody's out of here by noon. But anybody that can, would you please stand up just for a second, if you're able to? Just stand up, if you're able to. And then what I want you to do is get your hands together for 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay, sit down. I bet Croell $100 I'd get a standing ovation. These stories are just awesome, and it tells me something about memory, because in my little book, I had written a story about George Timmon was before he met girls, he was my best buddy, and dumped me at about 8th grade, but anyway, we did everything together. And so I wrote a story about how we're down doing something at Crane Creek, throwing pebbles across the creek. And Charlie Larson had some geese that happened to be on there, and we started throwing rocks at them, and they flew away. Cobb saw us and he chased us. And somehow we got away hiding in the dike and so forth. So I wrote that story in my little book. Well, about 5 years ago or so, we're standing out in front of here at the Irish Fest. It was Roger and Greg Timlin, and I think John Scally was there. And Greg said to me, "Sheridan," he says, "I got one complaint about your book." I said, "Geez, I thought you'd have about 10 or 20 complaints." He said, "No, just one." He said, "You know that story you wrote about Cobb Larson chasing you and George?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, it's a great story, but it wasn't you. It was me and Paul Junko. And I think, so I said, I'm going to check with your brother George, who lives in South Bend. I texted him the next day, and he said, yeah, he said, Greg's right. You just heard that story so many times, you thought that it was us. So our memories could just be crazy. And I want to read one quick story and then give it back. And as I say, we'll make sure you're out of here by noon. And this story has to do with the fact that I told you earlier that I wasn't the best basketball player in the world, but I do have one record at Turkey Valley I want to read about.